it's Rebecca and today is another book review day and I have been reading Coraline by Neil Gaiman. So I will read you the blurb and talk to you about the book. When Coraline explores her new home, she steps through a door and into another house just like her own, except that it's different. It's a marvellous adventure until Coraline discovers that there's also another mother and another father in the house. They want Coraline to stay with them and be their little girl. They want to keep her forever. Coraline must use all of her wits and every ounce of courage in order to save herself and return home. So this is a book that I have been meaning to read for years. I have owned it for I don't know how long. I saw the film when it first came out. Terrified me. Absolutely terrified me. It was so peculiar. And I just needed to read the book, and I'm so glad I did, and the book was even more peculiar than the film. So Coraline lives with her mum and dad, and they've moved into this strange house that's kind of split up into flats. And she goes exploring, and there's a strange man who lives above her who is training mice, and there's two women that live below her, and they are in the theatre. And she kind of makes friends with them and talks to them and all this kind of stuff. And she notices one day when she's in her own home that there's a door. And she asks her mother where it leads to. And she says nowhere. And she takes a key and she unlocks the door and there's just bricks. So that's a bit rubbish. And then on her exploring again, she takes the key and she unlocks the door and there's a corridor. And she goes through the corridor and she comes out the other side and it's her own house again. And she's very kind of confused. She doesn't understand what's going on. And then she sees her mother in the kitchen and she goes up to her mother. And she's like, oh my goodness, mother, I've just come through the door through the corridor into our own home. And as the woman turns around, she looks exactly like Coraline's mother, but she has buttons for eyes. And the father is exactly the same. And they talk to her as normal. So they're like, oh, Coraline, you know, do you want some lunch? All this kind of normal stuff. And Coraline's a bit like, no, thank you. You're all a bit weird and I want to go home. But Coraline's other mother insists that she is home and that she should stay there. And although that sounds very simple, it's one of those stories, especially for children, that can be quite terrifying. Do you remember a film called Flight of the Navigator? It's a film that I used to watch when I was younger and I absolutely loved it. And it's about a boy that falls when he's out playing with his brother and he kind of hits his head. And then a few minutes later he's like, I'm out in the forest all on my own. He goes home and 20 years or something has passed because he's been up on an alien spaceship, and he goes home and his parents 20 years older and his younger brother is now older than him. And it's all very peculiar. And that used to terrify me, that I would go out one day and come home and find that my parents had changed or they didn't live in the house anymore, all that kind of stuff. And this is kind of similar, that you think that something is familiar and safe and it actually isn't. And there's also a scene in Labyrinth. Oh, my childhood was quite dark, where Sarah has wandered through the labyrinth, and she's wandered into a place that looks exactly like her bedroom, and she thinks that she's safe, she's home, everything's back to normal, and in fact it actually isn't. It's still dark and twisted and peculiar. And so I really enjoy that kind of fear. It did make me frightened. Although I'd seen the film, it made me frightened for her again, because you are panicking that she's not going to be able to find her way home, and the other mother does whatever she can to keep Coraline there in the other world. So she steals the key so she can't get back through the door. She sends her on little tasks and makes everything really difficult for her. And it is just a really brilliantly exciting story. It's very dark, it's very twisted, it is scary, and I would recommend it 100%. It is such a good book, fairly short, but really, really enjoyable, really dark. I like dark, I can't help it. So yes, so definitely would recommend. So have a good day and I will see you soon. Bye bye.